So most of you drove here this morning or rode with someone in a car, right? None of you walked, did you? Or rode a bike or anything? Okay, so when you came here in a car, looked like we have a few that might have walked. What is the most important thing? What's the first thing you did when you got in the car? Buckle up. I was hoping somebody wouldn't say that. You started it. That's the one I'm looking for. You started it. So when you started it, what happened? What did you use? What's the first thing you used? The key, but what does the key access? Let's go further. Battery, right? Someone said power. So could we say that the battery is the most important thing in the car? Which is the most important in us, the brain or the heart? I think medically they would say the brain, right? We have a few, it's kind of here or there, maybe. The brain controls the heart, but the heart feeds the brain, right? I don't know all that, but here's the thing. You can't necessarily say that the battery in the car is the most important thing, can you? Yet the whole car will not run without a battery. It powers the ECM, it powers the ignition, it powers your climate controls, it powers your lights. It won't run without it, will it? Unless you have an older car or an old tractor or something that doesn't have all the electronics. Okay, so it won't run. All right, now let's take that battery out of the car and let's have it fully charged and let's set it aside. Let's say we'll set it on the concrete floor and come back a month later and put that battery back in the car and try to start the car. Would we have any results? No results, would we? It'd be dead probably. Okay. But that battery, when it's in the car, it gives life-giving, it's a life source. It's a power source. It gives sustenance. Okay, but this battery has to have input. So there's a mechanism in the car called an alternator. And when the battery does its job, it starts the car, it starts the alternator, and there is power going from the engine back into the battery. Does that make sense? Y'all know that. All right, so this battery does its job, yet it is continuously being filled and filled and filled. But the battery is continuously doing its job as well. I would like to liken this illustration to faith, and that's what I want to speak about. I want to speak about the faith of the faithful today. This battery could be similar to our faith. We have faith, and when the ignition hits, faith kicks in, and it powers our existence or our life, our Christian life. Yet, if we take faith and use faith alone, we set it aside and we say, this is faith, that's what I have faith, yet it sits by itself off in a corner, it will die. And it will not produce. The battery cannot produce mobility in and of itself. And that is, faith is similar. Faith or belief is very similar. There is accompaniment, I can't get that word out. There is stuff that goes with it, for lack of better English. And so that's what we want to look at today. So we want to read a story in Joshua 2, a story of someone with faith. If you have a Bible, you can turn to Joshua 2 and follow along. They might have it on they beat me to it. Joshua 2. All right, and Joshua the son of Nun sent out of Shittim 2 men to spy secretly, saying, go view the land, even Jericho. And they went and came into an harlot's house named Rahab and lodged there. And so not too long before this, Moses had died. And the children of Israel were fixing to cross Jordan and go into Canaan land and take the land. This is an exciting time for the children of Israel. They had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. The old generation had died off, save 2, Caleb and Joshua. And they were ready to take the land now. And Joshua, he sends 2 spies across, and he says, go spy out the land, but pay special attention to Jericho. It seemed like Jericho might have been a gateway city or something. And it was told, verse 2, the king of Jericho saying, behold, there came men in hither tonight of the children of Israel to search out the country. And the king of Jericho sent unto Rahab, saying, bring forth the men that are come to thee, which are entered into thine house, for they be come to search out all the country. All right, and the woman took the 2 men, and hid them, and said thus, There came men unto me, but I wist not whence they were. So something motivated Rahab to go ahead and hide the two men, the two spies. She knew something. There was something in her that knew something. And it motivated her, or it caused her to hide the two servants of God that were coming to spy out the land. And it came to pass about the time of the shutting of the gate, when it was dark, that the men went out. Whither the men went, I wot not, or I knew not. Pursue after them quickly, for ye shall overtake them. But she had brought them up to the roof of the house, and hid them with the stalks of flax, which she had laid in order upon the roof. And the men pursued after them the way to Jordan unto the fords. And as soon as they which pursued after them were gone out, they shut the gates. So the gates were shut. So the two children of Israel, the two men of Israel, two spies of Israel were in Jericho, and the gate was shut, and they could not escape through by the way of the gate. Okay, so verse 8. And before they were laid down, she came up unto them upon the roof, and said unto the men, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror is fallen upon us, and that all the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did unto the two kings of the Amorites that were on the other side Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and earth beneath. Now therefore I pray you, swear unto me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that you will also show kindness unto my father's house, and give me a true token. And that you will save alive my father and my mother and my brethren and my sisters and all that they have, and deliver our lives from death. And the men answered unto her, Our life for yours, if ye utter not this business of ours. And it shall be, when the Lord hath given us the land, that we will deal kindly and truly with thee. Then she let them down by a cord through the window, for her house was upon the town wall, and she dwelt upon the wall. And she said unto them, Get ye to the mountains, lest the pursuers meet you, and hide yourselves there 3 days, until the pursuers be returned, and afterward may you go your way. And the men said unto her, We will be blameless of this thine oath, which thou hast made us swear. Behold, when we come into the land, thou shalt bind this line of scarlet thread in the window, which thou didst let us down by, and thou shalt bring thy father, and thy mother, and thy brethren, and all thy father's household home unto thee. And it shall be that whosoever shall go out of the doors of thy house into the street, his blood shall be upon his head, and we will be guiltless. And whosoever shall be with thee in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if any hand be upon him. And if thou utter this our business, then we shall be quit of thine oath, or we shall be blameless of the oath, which thou hast made us to swear. And she said, According unto your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed. And she bound the scarlet line in the window. And they went and came unto the mountain, and abode there 3 days, until the pursuers were returned. And the pursuers sought them throughout all the way, but found them not. So the two men returned, and descended from the mountain, and passed over, and came to Joshua the son of Nun, and told him all the things that befell them. And they said unto Joshua, Truly the Lord hath delivered into our hands all the land, for even all the inhabitants of the country do faint because of us. So here we have a story of a harlot, and yet she had something in her heart that told her to protect these two men that would then lead to the destruction of their country. And in doing so, she sided with Israel, and she took Israel's stance, and she protected them, and in doing so, she protected herself. Now, she could have believed that Israel is a powerful Israel, and yet decided that God would view her as special and take care of her in this situation, but she did not. This belief caused her to action. And what she did was that she followed through with the instructions that the two spies had given her. Now, I don't know how the two spies decided that this is what God wants them to do. I don't know that they had a manual with them that said, in this case, do so and so. Yet, it seemed like they had the faith that God would honor what they had requested of the harlot, of Rahab. They simply told her to tie a cord into the window, an identifying marker to mark where she lived. They said, if you do this and you all are all in the house, you'll be saved. How did they know that? It was by faith. It was by faith that they knew this. They understood that God would save her because she was faithful to God's anointed. And she did it. That's all she did, yet she did it. She believed it and she did. That's kind of what faith is. We believe and we do. Faith is not something set aside like the car battery that I mentioned, that it just sits there. Faith is something that requires action or brings action. It produces fruit. And it did in Rahab's life. She simply tied that cord in the window. And what happened when the city of Jericho was destroyed? There was one section of wall that did not fall. It stayed standing there. It was because of faith, because of her faith. Her faith produced action, and it caused God to move as well. God moved on her behalf and also the behalf of the two spies. In Mark 2, we'll turn to Mark 2. There's a story of the paralytic that got healed. Verse 1, and again he entered into Capernaum, and after some days it was noised that he was in the house. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them. No, not so much as about the door, and he preached the word unto them. And there came unto him, bringing one sick of the palsy, which was born of four, or he was carried of 4 men. His 4 friends were carrying him. So this guy was an invalid, completely out. And they were carrying him, and they were bringing him to Jesus. There was something that motivated them to bring him to Jesus. When they could not come near unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. And so they were so desperate that they tore the roof up. How would you feel if somebody was on your roof tearing the metal or the shingles off to let someone down into the presence of Jesus? It's probably had different roofs back then, but they were determined. They knew something. They felt something. They knew something. And verse 5, he says, and when Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. Now, let me ask you something. How can you see faith? How can you see faith? Jamin. By what they were doing. Yes. Their faith motivated them to do. Now, they seen something. Jesus said that he saw their faith, and that's what he based the healing off of. He saw their faith. He saw what they did, and he saw that they believed because of what they did. And immediately, see here in verse 6. But there was certain of the scribes sitting there and reasoning in their hearts, Why doth this man thus speak blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God only? And immediately when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason ye thus in your heart? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise, take up thy bed, and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. And he said to the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, Arise, take up thy bed, and go thy way into thine house. And immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed and glorified God, saying, We never saw it in this fashion. And so there's another thing I'd like to point out with this story is the legalist was against faith. And you notice in the story of Rahab, there was someone that was trying to squelch faith. They were going after faith, trying to destroy it. And the Pharisees did the same thing here. They questioned, they doubted, they mocked. And this is many times the way it is. And we actually have an older illustration of this, and it is of Isaac and Ishmael. Ishmael, which was born of law, which was born of carnal reasoning and thinking, he was not the child of promise. Isaac was the child of promise. Ishmael mocked Isaac. And if we choose to walk a life of faith, we will be mocked and we will be scorned. It is just the way it is, because a life of faith cannot be reasoned around. It is something where we believe and we do because we believe. And we believe because God said so. God said something is true, we believe it, and it produces fruit, and it produces action. Yet Ishmael will mock that. The old man will mock that. The Pharisee will mock that, because we can't reason around. We can't necessarily write it in a book of formulas and say this and thus is how we do. But faith is seen. Jesus said he's seen their faith, and then that produced results. In Matthew 9:21, the story of the woman with the issue of blood, she said to herself, "If I may but touch his garment, I shall be whole." You notice she had a thought. She said, "If I may but touch his garment, I will be whole." She realized something, and she believed it, and she did it. Was she healed? She was healed. She was healed because of, what did Jesus say? Jesus turned unto him about, and when he saw her, he said, "Daughter, be of good comfort, thy faith hath made thee whole." And the woman was made whole from that very hour. The point I'm trying to raise here is that faith produces action. And if this woman would have said, "I believe he can heal me," yet she would not have reached out and touched the hem of the garment, would she have been healed? I don't think so. It motivated her, the faith motivated her to action, and she was healed through it. Okay, and we can't have a message about faith without bringing in Hebrews 11, can we? Let's turn to Hebrews 11 and read what the writer of Hebrews has to say. Hebrews 11, verse 1, he says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Faith has evidence. Notice he says faith is the substance of things hoped for, and it's the evidence of things not seen. What did Jesus see to see faith? He saw action, right? Faith produces action, which is evidence of a belief that we have. And so he says, faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good report. And then he goes on to say, it's through faith we understand the world was made. Faith, Abel offered a sacrifice more excellent than Cain, by which he obtained witness that he was righteous, God testifying of his gift. And by it he being dead yet speaketh. Abel believed, and he did. He believed, and he did. That's what happened here. By faith, Enoch was translated that he should not see death. You know, Enoch was taken. He did not die, but he went to be with God. And in verse 6, he says, "But without faith it is impossible to please him, for he that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, being warned of God, of things not seen, as yet moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world, and became the heir of righteousness, which is by faith." Let's dwell on Noah for just a minute. Put yourself in his shoes back many years ago, and he's in a wicked society. He's in a time of wickedness and chaos. He's in a time where righteousness is not very popular. And he hears from God, and God says, "Build an ark." Now, I've wondered myself, how did Noah know this? How did he understand that he's going to build an ark? This is a huge undertaking. We read it in the Bible, and we believe it, but if you think about all the dynamics of it, do you think Noah doubted? He think, "Well, am I hearing right? This is pretty big. This is absurd, it seems like almost." I don't know what he thought, but we know he reached the conclusion that he is to build an ark, a 120-year project, I believe. So he reached this conclusion that God is saying, build an ark. Now, he's building an ark. He's not building it by a lake or a sea. He's building it on dry ground. And as he builds, he's being made fun of. The people around him mock. He was a preacher of righteousness, the Bible says. And he would preach righteousness as this thing is being built. It says here that he condemned the world. He despised the world. In other words, he did not hear what they were saying. By building this ark and saying that destruction is coming, he was saying, he's speaking against the world. Does that make sense? He was saying, I'll have nothing to do with the sins of the world. I have nothing to do with this destruction. I will be saved through this ark. And yet Noah, he pursued this, and he built this ark, and he was saved because of it. And he became an heir of the righteousness which is by faith. And so this faith, this belief in God, and this belief that he heard from God produced results. It produced something. It produced an ark. That's what it produced. This faith did. And then he says in verse 8, by faith Abraham, when he was called to go out into a place which he should after receive for an inheritance, obeyed and went out, not knowing whither he went. But he went. He heard and he did. And then by faith he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles or tents, with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Through faith, Sarah also received strength to conceive seed, and was delivered of a child when she was past age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore sprang even of one, and him as good as dead, so many as the stars of the sky in multitude, and as the sand which is by the seashore innumerable. That's how many, because of faith, that sprang from Abraham. Now, just an interesting thought here for y'all to ponder. Did y'all ever think about that you could actually be a child of Abraham? He says here that by as many as the sands of the seashore and the stars in heaven. I don't think there's that many people living in Israel right now. We don't know exactly who are the descendants of Abraham, but that's a promise that God gave to Abraham, and Abraham followed through with what God asked of him, and he received that promise. He believed, and results happened. Okay, let's drop down to verse 23. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hid 3 months of his parents, because they saw he was a proper child, and they were not afraid of the king's commandment. By faith, Moses, when he came to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Moses had it real nice. Moses was in the king's courts. He was in the king's house. Yet by faith, he chose to suffer affliction with the children of God. Other historical articles, like Josephus and different ones, would say that Moses was actually a general in Pharaoh's army, and he was a powerful general. He won victories that other generals in the Egyptian army could not win. Moses was actually being set up to be the next king of Egypt. That's really what he let go of. It was being a king and a monarch in Egypt. He let go of that, and by faith he identified with the children of Israel, and he believed that God was calling him to them, and he obeyed. It says he chose to suffer affliction with the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. Through faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of the blood, lest he that destroyed the firstborn should touch them. Excuse me. And then also by faith the walls of Jericho fell after they were compassed about 7 days. And so the children of Israel, when they walked around Jericho for 7 days, do you think they ever wondered and thought, this is foolishness? We're just walking around this wall like we're going on a walk here. And they're just walking. Then the seventh day, they walked 7 times around. And then they blew a trumpet, and the walls fell down. They just came down. And it's just a picture of what faith is. Faith is stepping out and doing the crazy stuff, I guess you could say. Doing the stuff that we think it doesn't make sense to us. Yet we hear from God and we do, because that's what produces results. We can say we have faith, we can think we have faith, yet if we do not do, it is simply a belief system that we have that doesn't really produce anything. And then the harlot Rahab is brought into this as well. It says, by faith the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she received the spies with peace. What shall I more say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, of Barak, of Samson, of Jephthah, of David, also of Samuel and the prophets. How many of you realize that Samson was a man of faith? His life seems a little scandalous, but he's listed as a man of faith here. And I'm still trying to wrap my mind around Samson's story. What is God saying through the story of Samson? And I'd love input on that. who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, waxed valiant in fight, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. And others had trials of cruel mockings and scourgings, yea, moreover, of bonds and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn asunder, they were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskins and goatskins, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains, in dens and caves of the earth. These all, having obtained a good report through faith, received not the promise. God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. These had not all seen Jesus Christ. They had not received the promise of the Holy Spirit. They had not received the promise of Jesus in their hearts yet. They were living in an Old Testament dispensation, yet they chose to walk a life of faith. Any of these at any time could have denied Jesus Christ and walked a life of ease. Yet they believed something and it produced fruit. And it was such a strong belief that they allowed themselves to be stoned because of it, to be sawn asunder. I believe the prophet Isaiah was sawn asunder. And they were slain with the sword. They wandered around destitute and afflicted because of their faith. Their faith produced something. It was alive and it was real. And chapter 12, verse 1, he says, "Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God," always looking to the source of our faith, Jesus Christ. That is where faith comes from, is from Jesus Christ. And then we have the choice. Noah had the choice. Would he build the ark or would he not build the ark? God values our choices. In the Garden of Eden, he placed the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. He said, don't eat of it. And he gave them a choice. And that's what God values today still. We have the choice. When we believe something and we have the faith, we have the choice of obeying or disobeying. When we obey, it produces fruit. It produces righteousness. And some amazing things happen. Powerful things happen. God working through us to will and to do of his good pleasure. Yet he always allows us to choose if we would obey or if we do not want to obey. All right, James 2, verse 14. "What doth it profit, my brethren, though a man say he hath faith and hath not works? Can faith save him? If a brother or sister be naked and destitute of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Depart in peace, be ye warmed and filled, notwithstanding you give them not those things that are needful to the body, and what doth it profit?" James is raising the question. He says, can faith save you? And then he brings in a physical illustration and says, if someone is naked, needs clothing, or is destitute of daily food, and we say, I wish you well, I wish you food, I wish you clothing, I bless you with that, and that's it. The question that he's asking is, have they been clothed and have they been fed? No, they haven't. Your faith produces fruit. It produces food and it produces clothing for these destitute ones. Even so, faith, if it hath not works, is dead, being alone. Just like that battery, if we pull it out of the car and we set it aside, it will die. It will die and it will not produce anything. It will just be a skeleton or sitting there with no value, except you could recharge it and use it. Yea, if a man say, Thou hast faith, and I have works, show me thy faith without thy works, I will show thee my faith by my works. Thou believest that there is one God, thou doest well. The devils also believe and tremble. James points out that even the demons understand that there is a God. Even they believe. They believe that Jesus died on the cross. They know he died on the cross. They believe it. Yet, there's something more for the children of God. They believe it, and it produces fear in them. It produces, they know their time is drawing close for their punishment, the demons. But James is saying there's something more. There's something more. We're talking about fruit production. But wilt thou know, O vain man, that faith without works is dead? Was not Abraham our father justified by works when he offered up Isaac his son upon the altar? Abraham heard from God and he obeyed. And through this he was justified. In other words, he was saying, God is righteous, God is holy, I will obey him. And then when the test came, he did obey him. And he justified his belief. He justified his faith by the actions. He showed the world what his belief really was, that God was God and he was to be obeyed because he believed in him. You see then, verse 22, seest thou how faith wrought with his works, and by works was faith made perfect, or faith was made whole. So we have the belief, and then by the outworking of it, then we have a complete package. Does that make sense? So if we believe something, it works itself out. Let's bring in a simple illustration. So if you believe that you could climb a tree and you would go and do it, you would have validified your belief. You would have showed the world that your belief is true and it is accurate. Or if you believe that you could build a pole barn, which many of us do, and you go and you do it, you have proved to everyone that your belief of your ability to build a pole barn and your ability have met together, and it has become one. Your belief is accurate. It is true. You're showing your belief. And that is how it is, I believe, in part with our life with Jesus, is we say he is the power that we have forgiveness of sins through him, and we walk with him, and he is the power of our life. We believe that the sick can be healed. We believe that he has gifts for us. We can say all that, but until the action comes to meet together with it, it's just mere words. But when the action comes and meets together with the belief, we have power. We have power. And the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. You see then how by works a man is justified, and not by faith only. Likewise also was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she received the messengers, and sent them out another way? For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead. Now there is I want to just say this. There is a thought out there that says if we believe in Jesus and we trust in him, then we will love him enough that we have to be obedient to him. Let me clarify. So if I receive the forgiveness of Jesus Christ, now I put a pressure on myself that I have to obey him because I love him. That is still somewhat of a legalistic way of thinking, but yet if we trust Jesus completely, we find forgiveness of sins through him, and we walk with him in 100% obedience, and we say, Jesus, I am yours. I am yours. I am your soldier. And we walk in obedience with him, then we will be blessed, and our faith and our belief come together. But what I was trying to say is that it is not... Our works are not something that is produced by legalism. It is something where we walk with Jesus, in close communion with Jesus, and as he says go, we go. And as he says do, we do. And when Jesus says that, he gives the strength to also do it. And so it really comes down to a simple thing. When we believe in Jesus and we walk with him, Jesus will say go, and he will say do. And so it really boils down to something very simple, and that is our choice. We have the belief, and we have the commandment, but what is our choice? Is our choice to walk in obedience, or is our choice to follow the flesh and say, no, Lord? So that's what God has for us today, is what is our choice in walking with him? And it comes down to daily things. It comes down to daily things. What do we choose? Do we choose to walk with God, to walk with Jesus, or do we choose to not obey him and walk away? So that's the challenge I would like to leave for us all today to consider, and just want to bless each one of you all. I wish a blessing on each one of you all for this coming week, and may God bless you, and may you glorify his name as you walk with him. Amen.